an audiobook theater podcast. I am your host and writer behind 99geek.ca, Andrew Geczy, and this is being recorded on Monday, May 10th, 2021 at 10:41 a.m. My goal in life has always been to write for television, but it's a goal I've had little luck so far in attaining. So instead, I've resorted to self-publishing novels on Amazon, but writing the monthly chapters like episodes of TV shows that people can download at 99geek.ca or patreon.com/99geek. They go to the same place now. Every chapter is released in 4 parts, a teaser in 3 acts, and every month features a different book, spanning both science fiction and fantasy and every genre in between. That's right. I wrote all the books featured on this podcast, trying to make ends meet in what feels like a poverty nightmare. I'm doing all of this alone, living off unemployment insurance. I don't have a budget. I don't have a team, no editors or producers. I have no backup, no support. I'm completely alone, pro bono, with nothing but my passion for telling stories, and thus I ask you not to judge me or my work or my production values too harshly. I'm doing the best I can, trying to wear all the hats. Tonight we'll be reading from Phase 3 of Season 1 of 99% Geek, a chapter of a book entitled Adrift Homeless. Remember, you can follow along at 99geek.ca. Chapters are somewhat standalone, but at least make sure you start on Week 1 for the recap. This is, in fact, Week 1. Welcome. This is chapter or episode number 11 of Adrift Homeless, entitled Still Be Here When You Get Back. And so we begin with week number 1. And I've got some water here, and it's delicious. I just spilled some on my hand. All right, previously on Adrift Homeless. Romeria is a dying desert world in a one-planet solar system surrounded by a nebula. The nation of Himalaya City has formed a conglomerate with the other nations of their planet to build a massive colony ship to the stars, known as Project Rebirth. General Ed Gilbert leads the Rebirth project, and he's found a civilian first officer in Dr. David Stanfield, roommate and longtime best friend of recently recruited Emma Penman, newly appointed chief engineer of the project, a position previously held by her mother. It was upon recruiting the doctor and helping science whiz Catherine Cat Pross seek a rare unknown element in the deep desert that war broke out between Himalaya City forces and a terrorist faction known as the Blazkor Nation, led by the ruthless tyrant Suma Devis. Her grandfather was a war criminal for genetic experiments he conducted on innocent people. The experiments included genetic modification to force compliance amongst the people of Blazkor. There were many losses on both sides, but with the help of her own daughter Tamika Mika Davis, Himalaya City was victorious in defeating Suma Devis' army. I called her, sorry, Tamika Mika Davis. Sorry. I incorrectly, I Americanized her name. That was horrible of me. I don't know why I would do that. I'm sorry, Tamika. Anyway, meanwhile, Emma's kid brother, Alec Penman, a talented computer hacker, came face to face with his dangerous, abusive father for the first time since he was a baby, and was recruited to illicitly secure spots aboard the Rebirth. Little did he know he was securing spots for a Blazkor attack led by Suma Devis and what remained of her forces. Her men easily took the ship and set it in a slow free fall towards the planet in a plan to wipe out all Romerian life with one blow. It was only through the combined heroic actions of Emma, David, Kat, Tamika, Alec, as well as Security Chief Colonel John Adams and Fighter Squadron Leader Lieutenant Sarah Mickles, that they were able to retake the ship and stop it from plunging into the planet below. Though the disaster was averted, and Tamika's mother, Suma, was defeated for the last time, John suspects General Gilbert might have had more to do with the attack than he's letting on, and the colonel is determined to get to the bottom of it. He's not going to let their prior mentor-protege relationship get in the way of finding out the truth. This is season 1 or book 1, chapter or episode 11. Still be here when you get back. Released on patreon.com/99geek or 99geek.ca on May 2021. I'm just going to change that. 99geek.ca. It's easier to remember. Okay. And we begin at a nebula research outpost prime situated at the furthest edge of the solar system. I've started a new thing for this, at least for this book, where every scene now begins with the location title. So, Nebula Research Outpost Prime, situated at the furthest edge of the solar system. It's supposed to be kind of like an Independence Day sort of thing. Anyway. Boop, boop. Boop, boop. Ted was used to all the bleeps and bloops of Nebula Research Outpost Prime. They never stopped going off after every few moments. And after spending 7 months there, he couldn't even hear them. Not as they were, anyway. To his ears, the bleeps and the bloops were a beautiful, never-ending song. And it was most startling when the melody of that song suddenly changed. Boop, boop. Bing. Boop, boop. Bing. Ted looked up from his poker hand. He had been just about to bluff his roommate into folding on a royal straight when the pattern of boops changed. He placed his hand face down on the small metal table in the nook that served as a rec room and glanced at his partner Carter. "What in the solar hell do you think that is?" he asked, turning then to gaze down the hallway towards the control room, unable to see anything from the recreation nook. His heart was pounding in his chest, his anxiety suddenly skyrocketing. Things never changed in their station. It was the same monotony day in and day out. And while Ted often wished for some excitement, the reality was he felt comfortable and safe in his routine, and he didn't like that something had upset that routine. Boop boop. Bing. Ted got out of his seat, Carter looking up at him with eyes wide. Shut. No, just the first. Eyes wide. Ted had been there longer, by just 4 months, but Carter looked up to Ted as if he was some sort of station veteran. The shifts were in 8-month intervals, with a new personnel transferred every 4 months. Carter was just about to finish his first half of his shift, and Ted was a month from going home. But even though he had been there longer, he had never heard anything quite like that bing before. That should probably be in quotations. There you go. "Don't look at my cards," Ted muttered to Carter, rushing down the tight metal corridor to the small control room. He needn't have worried. Carter put his hand down and quickly followed right behind. The station that was the research outpost was tiny and cramped, with little space to move around, let alone ever get any kind of privacy. The control room was especially more cramped still, and Ted had to contort his body to slide into one of the 2 seats at the station's primary control panel. Carter slid into the other one as Ted's hands flew across the controls. "Let's see what's got you so upset," Ted muttered, silencing the alarm and looking out the large observation windows in front of them out into the blue nebula. "I don't see anything," he muttered. Not that they ever saw anything in those swirling gases. Those swirling gases. "The sensors are picking up a sharp spike in density," Carter reported from where he was pulling up readout data from quadrant 001762. Ted squinted as hard as he could into the blue swirling gases around that quadrant, but he could see nothing. "A spike in density," Ted repeated, confused. He'd never heard of such a thing. The nebula, for the most part, at least from his research, was stable and fairly uniform. "Send out a probe?" Ted suggested to Carter. The coalescing gases of the nebula made it nearly impossible for them to get consistent readings, even from their position on its very edge. What could cause the gases of a nebula to suddenly become denser? Some kind of star formation, perhaps? Or was there something else in the muck that wasn't there before? Wait, Ted said as he looked at the quadrant again and this time saw something. It looked like a light, a blistering bright green light that seemed to be getting brighter and larger, or perhaps closer and closer. What is that? Ted looked down at his dashboard and brought up communications. I'm reporting this to Himalaya City. I'm picking up temperature and energy readings. Temperature and it's reading books. Anyway, I'm picking up temperature and energy readings, Carter said, his voice getting increasingly panicked. Somewhere close to 1% solar output. 1% didn't sound like much, but 1% solar output was many magnitudes of energy greater than anything they could conceive. Was it some kind of forming star? Ted looked up out the window again and his heart stopped beating. The light was right on top of them. Solar gods! Scene change. Boop, boop, ba-doo, ba-doo. Scene change. Boop, boop, ba-doo, ba-doo. Scene change. Boop, boop, ba-doo, 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 ba-doo. Control Center. Prime Central Station. Himalaya City. Romeria. Nebula Research Outpost Prime. This is Himalaya City, Prime Central Station. Senior Officer Dorsey spoke into his communications console. We read you loud and clear, Nebula Research Outpost Prime. Please continue with your report. Nothing. He raised the volume. Perhaps he had missed something. But the command center was unusually quiet. He could hear every squeak of his chair in the empty room, as most of the crew of the center had abandoned their posts to take part in the celebrations upstairs. Today was the day. The rebirth was finally ready to launch from space dock. Nebula Research Outpost Prime, Dorsey repeated, twisting a knob on his console to boost his signal. This is Himalaya City, Prime Central Station. We were receiving you, but then you cut out. Are you receiving us? Please respond. What's the problem? A voice over Dorsey's shoulder said, and the senior officer startled at the sudden break from silence. Dorsey turned to see it was his superior officer, Lieutenant Harry Styles. Not to be confused with the singer. The man was currently the ranking officer, watching over the center, but Dorsey had thought he too had joined everyone else upstairs. It was Nebula Research Outpost Prime, Senior Officer Dorsey told the lieutenant. They started transmitting and then cut out. I've tried to reach them again, but there's been no response. Lieutenant Styles squeezed the back of Dorsey's chair absent-mindedly and thought. It's probably just a nebula, he told the senior officer. You know how those gases cause interference. It was true that the research station was the furthest manned outpost that they had set up. It was true that the research station was the furthest manned outpost that they had, set up specifically to study the nebula up close after scans from a distance were largely inconsequential. Try going through the relay, the lieutenant suggested. Because the outpost's proximity to the nebula often caused communications to be unreliable at best, they had set up an unmanned communications relay satellite positioned just outside the nebula's influence. Dorsey took his repeating response to the outpost and transferred the signal to the communications satellite. What happened next was only more perplexing still. Nothing, Dorsey said to his lieutenant. The lieutenant frowned. They're still not responding? No, Dorsey corrected him. I mean, I'm getting no response from the relay. Lieutenant Styles scrunched up his face. Well, that's impossible. Whether they respond or not, the relay should at least send a confirmation that the signal was rerouted successfully. I know, sir. Senior Officer Dorsey muttered with growing frustration. But there's nothing. The lieutenant sighed. All right, he said after a moment of thought. Log this in the book, and when everyone else is on duty, we'll go over it with my superiors. He patted Dorsey on the back. In the meantime, when you're done, you can come on upstairs and get a piece of cake. It's red velvet. The lieutenant left him then, almost completely alone in that empty control center, to fill in the logs on his own. But Dorsey couldn't help but feel like there had to be something more he could do. He couldn't help but shake this nagging feeling like he shouldn't wait till later to figure it out. But what could he do? Well, maybe there was one more avenue he could try reporting this to. Rebirth. This is Himalaya City Prime Central Station. Scene change. Boop, boo-doo, boo-doo. Scene change. Boop, boop, boo-doo, boo-doo. Scene change. Boop, boop, boo-doo, 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 boo-doo. Boop, boo-doo, boop. Modified. Blastcore gunship. Just the shift in tones was hilarious. Modified. Blastcore gunship Mark 2.5 in orbit over Romeria. You seem like you know what you're doing, Gillian commented, watching Tamika work the controls. You don't even need me here anymore. You think so? Tamika asked Gillian, the two of them having spent the past month flying together. After a certain point, ferrying supplies and people to and from the Rebirth as many as 10 times a day, they started relieving their boredom by Gillian teaching Tamika how to fly. It started with Tamika just taking the controls for a minute or two. That's how it began. Now their positions were swapped, with Tamika in the pilot seat and Gillian as the co-pilot ready to take over only when needed, and she had been needed less and less. I don't know. Tamika shrugged, not nearly as confident. What if something goes wrong? Gillian raised an eyebrow at Tamika, leaning back and crossing her arms. The last run tonight is picking up Colonel Adams, she suggested, trying to make it seem as casual a suggestion as she could. He'd be your co-pilot on your way back. Mika frowned at her. I thought you liked Colonel Adams, she accused the crewman, putting a silly amount of emphasis on liked. Oh, then let me do that. I thought you liked Colonel Adams. Liked. A silly amount of emphasis. Gillian pushed Tamika up playfully, her jaw dropping open in denial. I do not, she insisted. I mean, I would, yes, if he suddenly asked me out, sure. Gillian shrugged. But he's dating Lieutenant Michaels, and that's just fine, she said, and Tamika's continued gaze, she added, I'm still allowed to dream. Tamika laughed. In your dreams, she asked, does he hold your hand? We sometimes even kiss, Gillian whispered scandalously, and they both giggled. Oh, girl, Mika muttered, double-checking her heading. You've got it bad. She turned her chair around to face the over 50 passengers seated in the gunship behind her. It was a mix of adults and children, civilian families moving to the Rebirth before it set out on its mission. We're coming up on the Rebirth now, she informed them with a friendly smile. You should be able to see it out your window to the right. Wow! One girl exclaimed. So cool! Exclaimed a boy. There was an impressed muttering amongst the others as they all craned to see out the windows. So I don't get it, Tamika said to Gillian, settling her seat back into place. Why would you miss out on a trip with your dream boy? Unless there's a party I wasn't invited to? Gillian squirmed and didn't respond. There is a party? Tamika exclaimed in surprise. I'm sorry, Gillian said, breaking down with guilt. It's a thing the squadron is doing. I would have invited you, but... No, it's fine, Tamika assured her friend. I don't even like fun. In fact, I hate it. Oh, don't be like that, Gillian muttered. Out the window in front of them, they could see the approaching Rebirth. It was a sight they'd seen 100 times before. Though the space around the large, blocky but tall spaceship was teeming with movement as engineered drones worked away at finishing repairs, and as cargo haulers and passenger transport similar to themselves ferried supplies and people to and from the planet. Was that even a proper sentence? Though the space around the large, blocky but tall spaceship was teeming with movement. Yeah, no, that definitely is not a proper sentence. All right, I'm gonna do that thing where I highlight it and get back to it later. And you'll just have to read to learn how that gets changed. One cargo hauler almost plowed into Tamika's gunship, and she was only just able to avoid a collision. Excuse you, Tamika muttered as Gillian activated the communications activated the comms. She activated the comms. That's what happened. This is Civilian Transport 3 to Rebirth Control, she spoke into the comms. Requesting landing permit. She spoke into the. I already said that. Into her headset. Yeah, there we go. She spoke into her headset. There. This is Civilian Transport 3 to Rebirth Control, she spoke into her headset. Requesting landing permit. This is Rebirth Control, came a woman's voice in response. Proceed to landing bay 1. Scene change. Boop, 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 boop. Scene change. Boop, 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 boop. Scene change. Boop, 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 boop. Landing Bay 1, the Rebirth, in orbit over Remeria. So, where is it? Private Dennis Monroe asked Lieutenant Sarah Mickles, confused. They were both standing on the busy flight deck and wait for the next transport, the pilots of Alpha and Beta squadrons having been reassigned to tour guide duty for the duration of the chaos. All around them, engineers ran about their business, refueling transports, loading and unloading. Where do you think? Sarah asked Dennis with a snort. Probably not like that, but a more Sarah-like snort. The same place everyone goes for a party. Lanky's Lounge. This was it. Finally, after a month straight of hell, they would be done. No more dealing with people, no more forcing a smile and singing the safety song. After today, they would be setting off, and Sarah's pilots would become hers to train and lead once again. She just had to get through one more tour. The ramp lowered. Her fake smile fit snugly into place. Hello there and welcome, my new friends. We're here to tell you about new safety trends. Woo! And then it goes on from there. But we don't have to listen to that because scene change. Boop, boop, ba-doo, ba-doop. Scene change. Boop, boop, ba-doo, ba-doop. Scene change. Boop, boop, ba-doo, 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 ba-doop. Lanky's Lounge, the Rebirth, in orbit over Romeria. What have you? The old man in a suit said to his wife, the two a little too dressed up for the lounge. Seth handed him his brandy on the rocks and placed his wife's sherry on the table in front of her. It's funny, I looked up what a sherry was. Turns out it's just brandy mixed with something else. Oh, so they're both brandies. Okay, cool. I wouldn't have thought that when I gave his wife a sherry. Anyway, they were seated by one of the large observational windows along the wall of the lounge, and a Blazkor gunship soared past beneath them on the way to the landing platform. The man's wife spoke, seeming a little distracted by a few young boisterous types being loud at a pool table on the other end of the lounge. Quite, yes. Indeed. Wouldn't you say, Miss? It doesn't get old, Steph admitted, to the old couple honestly with a smile. We'll still be open when the Rebirth launches from Space Dock later today. Half-price shots. The pilots from Alpha and Beta squadrons are going to be in attendance. Watch with everyone else from the best lookout spot on the ship, Lanky's Lounge. Oh, that sounds wonderful, the woman said, looking at her husband. Wouldn't you say, dear? Yes. The husband said with a nod. Most exquisite, yes. There was something about the two of them. They seemed very exaggerated people. They reminded Steph of her own parents, only her parents weren't as ridiculously exaggerated as this couple. What made these people more worthy of a spot on board? How come they got to live while her parents were counted amongst the casualties of that nightmare day a month ago? Steph rushed from the table and placed her waiting tray on the bar. You okay? Lanky asked her, eyeing her suspiciously. Can I go for a 5-minute break? Steph asked, already taking off her apron. Lanky nodded. Make it 15, he said with a wave, glancing out at the lounge to see who might need his help first. Steph stepped out from the lounge into the bustling center of the commercial district, letting a mother and her 2 boys pass before she tried squeezing through the crowds of people to the railing. She finally let herself breathe as she looked down upon the many floors of the commercial district below her. They were all overflowing with people buying and selling, all within an enclosed economy. She didn't know why watching all those people going about their day was strangely relaxing for her. Perhaps observing others go about the routines made her feel somehow above it all. Literally, at least, if not figuratively. You okay? A voice from beside her asked. Alec? Steph asked. Back? Sure. Steph asked back, turning around as the spiky-haired teen leaned against the railing at her side. Have you been spying on me? He was always there. Every time she got off was one thing, but predicting her breaks was something else entirely. Do you literally just watch me while I work? Alec raised his hands in defense. I was just coming for a drink when I saw you step outside. I swear nothing weird. I'm sorry, Steph muttered. Alec had been her only friend on the ship over the past month, and she couldn't deny how valuable his friendship had been to her. You just seemed so sad, he admitted. If you ever want to talk, he trailed off, and she knew that their talks usually consisted more of him talking and her laughing. I'm fine, she promised him. I just want to be left alone for a bit. Alec pointed at the lounge. Well, I'm gonna go get that drink. You still want to hang out later? Steph smiled. I get off at 11. Alec finished her sentence. I know. And then she was alone again. In a sea of hundreds, if not thousands of people, all going about their day as if their lives hadn't changed at all. Steph? Came another voice and this time it was most definitely not Alec's. Steph turned around in shock. Derek? She asked, her ex-boyfriend staring at her from 5 feet away, his jaw hanging open in surprise. Babe, Derek said as if he couldn't believe she was there. You made it! Scene change. Boop, boop, ba-doo-ba-doop. Scene change. Boop, boop, ba-doo-ba-doop. Scene change. Boop, boop, ba-doo-ba-doop, ba-doo-ba-doop. Boop, ba-doop, boop, ba-doo-ba-doop. Sorry, I can't help it. Bridge, the rebirth, in orbit over Remeria. This is Communications Chief Blake of the Rebirth. Billy spoke into his headset as he worked at his station, the bright white bridge teeming with people all going about their own jobs at terminals lined up along the walls around him. Uh-huh. Billy continued talking to someone over the comms. I'll try to reach them from here. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. He switched off the comm and rolled his eyes. What a loser. Is everything okay? Commander David asked, getting up from the captain's chair and stepping... Nah, that's the wrong voice. It's more John's voice. Let me try that. And again. Is everything okay? Commander David asked, getting up from the captain's chair and stepping down to Billy's station, having already watched everything transpire from a distance. Prime Central Station is reporting a communication error, the 23-year-old cocky communications expert muttered. Said they can't get a response from Nebula Research Outpost Prime. Wanted us to check it out. Like we don't got more important things to deal with right now. It doesn't hurt to try raising them on the comms, David said with a sigh. The comms chief really getting on his nerves. I didn't say I wasn't doing it, Billy said, hitting a few more buttons on his station and pulling off his headset. I'm getting nothing. Did you try the relay? The large, muscular man with blonde hair at the weapons station asked. Cadet Kevin Angeli had been picked out of hundreds of candidates for his vast knowledge of weapons, as well as his adept understanding of network systems, made him perfectly suited to program the AI needed to properly network with the hundreds of guns across Rebirth's surface. But it also meant he knew a thing or two about networked telecommunications. Yeah, asshole. I tried the relay first, Billy argued. I'm not a moron. Could we please have a little less toxicity on my bridge? Please? David pleaded as he sat back down at the captain's chair. He wasn't sure if Gilbert would find that sort of talk acceptable on his bridge, but General Gilbert was barely ever around anymore. He seemed happy to leave the day-to-days of command to David, but still made sure to show up for all the daily briefings. Could the princess help out over there? Billy asked, glancing angrily over to Catherine Pross at the science station. Or is she too busy with whatever she has going on? She seemed to be working on a completely separate project, something that involved a lot of math. Sorry, Cat stuttered, sorry. Sorry, Cat stuttered, realizing she was being addressed. The Nebula Research Outpost? She minimized her calculations and began working away at her science station. I'm picking up nothing conclusive from this distance. My suggestion would be that we launch a probe if you want more substantial report. Then do it, David ordered. As he watched, she typed a command into her terminal and then hit a red button on the side of the screen. There was a distant pop, as if they had just fired off a weapon, but instead it was a satellite-like, self-propelled, metal sphere they had fired like a bullet from a gun. Cat commandeered the main display with a push of a button at her console, a large 90-inch screen along the front wall that was previously focused on a steady horizon shot over Romeria, switched to instead displaying a top-down radar-like screen with a probe in the center. How long before it's in range of the outpost? David asked the science chief, Cat Pross. Cat scratched at the side of her nose absent-mindedly. At full speed, it would take the Rebirth about 40 minutes to cross the solar system, she explained to the commander. She explained to commander. No, to the. She explained to the commander. But my probes can make that trip in just 2. She frowned. I should be picking up something by now. In fact, they have a decent sensor radius. Okay. Can you see them? David asked, watching the sensor radius of the probe on the main display, waiting for it to pick up any positive signals, any bloop at all. The word bloop is getting a lot of action today. No, Kat admitted, typing away at her keyboard. Perhaps the outpost and array were both pulled deeper into the nebula for some reason. Suddenly, the main display blinked out and returned to the horizon shot of Romeria. What was that? David asked, looking across his bridge at everyone scrambling for more information. What just happened? Kat threw up her hands in the air. I just lost connection with probe. Billy, once more listening into his headset, dropped the earphones to hang from his neck and also gave a dramatic shrug. It was broadcasting on 5 different frequencies, and all 5 frequencies just went dead. I know you're all thinking what I'm thinking, Cadet Angeli said out loud. We're under some kind of attack. By who? Jack asked from the front of the bridge, where he sat alone at navigation and ship control. While they were in space dock, he didn't have much to do, most of the ship's functions being controlled by either the dock or Rebirth control out of the flight deck. Once they were free from the space dock, Jack would be working with control alongside also running navigations. Doesn't matter, Engeli asked everyone on the bridge. It's the only likely explanation. Cat? David asked the science chief, not wanting to believe anything about Engeli's theory was likely. I can think of 100 alternative scenarios. Cat assured the commander. Each one is more unlikely than the last. Commander David Stanfield leaned back in the captain's chair and sighed, stroking his chin for a moment, before finally seeking out the correct button on the armrest. He pushed the button. He pushed the button he was looking for and spoke into the small microphone built into the arm of the chair. General? He asked through the comm. What is it? The gruff man spoke back, and David was relieved he hadn't hit the wrong button again. We appear to have something, David said, not sure how to put it. There was a long pause on the other end. What the fuck does that mean? End of week 1. I hope you have enjoyed week 1 of Adrift Homeless, episode number 11 or chapter number 11. Yes, I feel like it was fine. I don't know, whatever. Let's not ruin it. Let's just get to the best part, the part that you will wait for every time, and probably totally don't skip. My name is Andrew Geczy, and my brand is 99% Geek, found at 99geek.ca. I'm a writer, writing monthly chapters of novels like episodes of TV shows, releasing them in 4 weekly segments, a teaser and 3 acts on Mondays at noonish on my Patreon page. Every month it's a different book, over a range of genres, and they sometimes even cross over and connect. At the end of the month, the finished chapter is added to the PDFs attached at the bottom of every post. Finding the finished books are self-published on Amazon. There's a dark fantasy story about a post-apocalyptic world where powerful royals ruled and... Let me try this whole paragraph again. It's like, no, don't do it! There's a dark fantasy story about a post-apocalyptic world where powerful royals rule and enslave the remaining people struggling to survive on the last remaining landmass. There's also a sci-fi story about a people on a dying world who have built a ship to a new one, but their project is almost brought down by a terrorist organization within their own ranks. Finally, there's a crossover story where characters from my other books are brought into the distant future where the princess of a far advanced civilization, one that lives in a solar system-sized megastructure around a Dyson Sphere, needs help defeating her twisted, power-hungry brother. And all these stories will be outside the paywall for all to enjoy as new episodes release weekly. And the finished chapters will be attached to the bottom of every post on the site in convenient PDF format, readable on computers, tablets, ebook readers, and phones at the end of the month. But that's not all my stories. There's also urban fantasy tales about a teenage girl turned into a vampire against her will, or a scorned lover investigating paranormal phenomena, or a journalist covering news and politics in the Middle East, and there's a fantasy story about a fallen angel trying to stop the end of the world. All these stories are published and available on Amazon and are also safe and sound behind the paywall in PDF format attached to an archive at the top of my Patreon page. Only viewable by subscribers, my entire library of work, thousands of pages worth, is easily accessible to every subscriber at any level. There's even a Geekly Weekly blog, which covers all the news you may have missed over the week, as well as ranks the week's worth of television, and makes predictions on what new pop culture things might be in the public consciousness for the next week. It releases every Saturday at noonish. Finally, I do video game streams, both multiplayer matchmaking as well as single-player campaign playthroughs. You can see me play games like Final Fantasy, Call of Duty, Hitman, and more. Watch them as they happen at twitch.tv/wingcommander4, or wait till I release the recorded videos on days when I have nothing else to release. Except for last week when I was so busy working on this chapter that I wasn't able to release anything. I wasn't even able to do much at all, really. Anyway, you can see it all in one place, so stay tuned and maybe subscribe. It's only $1, and the support you show would go a very long way, I promise. There are also higher tiers. Give $5 one month and you can name a character or a location or suggest a thing you might want to see. Basically, you get to give a noun, and then I promise to incorporate that noun into one of my stories somehow. Maybe not the same month you give the suggestion, but within 3 months guaranteed. No matter how crazy, you can't sabotage me, I promise. Think of it like a fun improv game, and you can keep giving nouns for every month you pay at the $5 tier. Or if you give $10, you don't get two nouns, but you can give a description to go with your noun. Describe the personality of your character, or the look of your location, or the importance of your item. For $10, you get a noun and a description. You can also give $1 towards supporting my efforts at video game streaming or my weekly blog if that's where your interests lie. I should warn you that if things don't improve for me soon, and I end up having to go back to working some sort of horrible fast food job or some horrible night shift job or other minimum wage bullshit things that I've had to do in my life, then quite likely the things are gonna the Geekly Weekly at least is gonna probably change. So if you are enjoying the Geekly Weeklies every week, then you might want to consider subscribing. It might be worth it to show your support in that way. And help me make a living out of this because it's been tough. I've been considering adding ads somehow, but I don't know really how to do that. I don't think I get enough traffic anyway. But yeah, so if you have anything to give, it would really mean a lot to me. I'm as poor as it gets, living paycheck to paycheck, and sometimes starving. So I understand if you are too. I don't want to take food out of your mouths. Your attention is enough. Say something. Comment here, or at the very least, follow me on Twitter at Andrew Geczy, or Instagram at WingCommander4. Remember to leave a review if you read one of my books. Any reviews on Amazon/Goodreads or subscriptions here at patreon.com or on my podcast or comments on social media will just encourage more people to check out my work and allow me to grow. I can't do it without your efforts. That's 3 different ways you can help. Write reviews on any site that lets you. Subscribe here for as low as $1. Or at the very least, use your voice to let me and the world know you like what you read here. And honestly, any of those 3 ways would mean the world to me from each and every one of you. It really would. Live long and prosper. May the force be with you. Long live Marceline the Vampire Queen. Remember that Kong bows to no one, but Godzilla is king of all monsters. We are the 99% Geek. And ignore the people on this stream that were spamming stuff about want to be famous. I mean, yes, I do, but I don't want fake followers and viewers to get there. Thank you. That's not my idea of fame. Anyway, live long and prosper. May the force be with you.